is more familiar to us in 1 Timothy 4, where Paul says, immerse yourself in these things, practice these things, preach the word in season and out of season, practice these things, immerse yourself in them so that all may see your progress. So that's the same use of that word. I just got a text saying that there's no sound on the live stream. Okay. The advance of the gospel, the progress of the gospel. I like both of those terms because this is the gospel expanding and reaching out, and that's what Paul wants. That's what Paul's mission was. What did Paul specialize in as a preacher? What did he like to do? Would he stay in one place for long? He liked to travel. More specifically, he liked to go places where the gospel had not yet been preached, and didn't like to hone in on other people's work. Now, other people were super talented at coming in after Paul and strengthening churches, but Paul generally did not stay in the same place. In fact, 1 Timothy is written to Timothy, who is in Ephesus, who apparently stays there many, many years. He's in Ephesus for a long time. That's not Paul's style. Now, as we've already observed, and you already know because you are familiar with Philippians, Paul is staying somewhere for a couple of years. He's staying in one place for a couple of years. And where is that? Prison. And the debate is whether it's in Caesarea by the sea, Caesarea Maritima, maybe it's in Rome. Either way, either place, he is surrounded by Roman soldiers, by the Praetorian Guard. He mentions them in this letter. And in this letter, he also anticipates being released. And so this is the fourth and final prison letter, as we call it. When we subdivide Paul's letters, this is one of the four prison letters. The others are Colossians and Ephesians, Philemon and Colossians. Philemon had the church in his home in Colossae. And so now he's writing to the Philippian church, all during this same time period. He doesn't give any indication about getting out of prison in Ephesians, Colossians, Philemon, but he does in Philippians. And so the assumption is this is the last of the prison letters. He will only write 3 more letters after this. All the others have already been written except 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus. And Larry will be teaching on 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus next quarter. So for the remainder of this quarter, this month, July, August, we will be making our way through Philippians. And then Larry is going to finish the Pauline corpus for us. We've looked at all the other letters so far in chronological order. Okay, so verses 12 through 25, verses 12 through 26 are set off by advance and the same word translated progress in verse 25. So we're going to be looking at that term as we go through these verses. You also have some other important words in these verses. One is gospel within this paragraph. Verse 12, again in verse 16. We'll look at that as a key word. And imprisonment. He's going to talk about his imprisonment in verse 13, verse 14, and verse 17. All right, so let's... and what we're talking about is the advance of the gospel. So think about those words, gospel and imprisonment. If something is imprisoned, is it making progress? Is that person able to get out and do what he wants to do and progress? And yet, while Paul is in prison, does the gospel progress? Does it advance? Absolutely. Can you stop the progress of the Word of God? In fact, the closing words of the book of Acts, which we'll get to in about a year, Acts 28, verse 31, says that Paul, under house arrest in Rome, he may have been in prison, but the gospel continued to spread unhindered. He was hindered, but the gospel was not. And this is part of that scene where Paul is preaching. He's in prison, but the gospel continues to advance. And he says this, that it is reaching the whole imperial guard, or the Praetorian guard, as it might be translated. And he mentions the Praetorian guard here in verse 13, and also at the end of the letter. He will mention in his closing words, he will mention that people here have become Christians who are part of Caesar's household, and they greet you. They greet you. That's at the end of the letter. So let's start by reading verses 12 through 14. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. It's because of Christ. And most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. All right, verses 12 through 14. How would you summarize that little sentence, or a couple of sentences there? What's he saying? I'm in prison, and that's turned out for good, the advancement of the gospel. Verse 14, people have become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment. What in the world? How is that possible? Yes, sir.
Well, you think of being in prison as being someplace that you have no access to anything. But Paul was in a box, but he was actually out of the box.
Okay, he was under house arrest. He was given some rights, and so I should have mentioned that as well. So he's writing letters. So yeah, that goes along with what you're saying. What do you mean exactly by out of the box?
He's able to communicate his message from Christ to the world as he was set up to do, without hindrance in a spiritual way.
All right, and that's certainly by divine arrangement. Paul may be in prison, but he is still able to reach out to folks. I wanted to mention this. There will be a second imprisonment, and it will not be under house arrest. It will be, from what we can perceive, to be in a very dire place. It's his second imprisonment, and what happens at the end of that imprisonment? Is he released? No, that's when he's killed. That's when he's martyred by Caesar Nero. I've got two hands here, my father, and then you're also a father, right, Rob? So we'll get two dads here. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other reason you asked why that was a good thing, that the advancement was going on. People outside, on the outside, could think, if Paul is in prison and things are going well, why don't I get up and get busy and do things?
Okay.
So by example, he was leading even though he was in prison.
I think that's a lot to do with it. Yes, sir. Okay. Paul has been persecuted quite a bit. We'll see that at the end of Acts. You already are familiar with it. But when Paul goes to Jerusalem, intending to then go on to Spain by way of Rome, none of that happens because the Jews are yet again trying to kill him. And it ended up being Gentile soldiers, the centurion, people who were protecting Paul, of all things, because they knew he was being treated unjustly. And that's in a very exciting drama that we will get into in our Acts study. But we're in Philippians right now. Mark, stop mentioning all of that. All right, so most of the brothers, the preachers, have become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment. And we're speculating about that. Why is that? They are much more bold to speak the word without fear. They see Paul, they see his example, and they are emboldened by that. They are encouraged by that to preach the word without fear. In the first century world, Christianity was still growing in popularity, but the Jewish people were especially hard on the gospel, on its spread. And we see that in Acts when we're looking at the spread of the gospel. You remember Peter and John were arrested by the Sanhedrin Council in Acts 4. They were released. Then the apostles all were arrested. They were beaten in Acts 5. What happened in Acts 7? When Stephen stood before the Sanhedrin council. He was stoned to death. He died. And then you have this young man named Saul, whom we also know as Paul, the author of Philippians. What did he start doing? Persecuting the church. Did Paul's persecution of the church, did the stoning of Stephen squash the spread of the gospel? It actually caused it to explode. And that's what Paul is celebrating in these verses. All right, when we did this Philippians study, it was on a Sunday night. We were actually in classroom 8, which has now become the new Bible lab. Karen stole that from me. And so that great big room, remember when we sat in sections of 5, and we then brought in this idea of turning and talking to each other. So we did that on a Sunday night. Well, it's Sunday morning, and I want to try this. I want to bring this back in, and I want us to take a couple of minutes to talk to your peers and answer the question. Why don't we, or how can we invite people to Parkway? So would you all humor me and take a couple of minutes to think about that, and let's talk about it. Do you actively invite people to Parkway? Why or why not? Cody, you got a story? You got a story you can share with us, right? All right, I'm probably going to regret this, but I'm going to start with Cody because he just happened to invite someone recently. And tell us what happened.
I was leaving Texas Roadhouse, and the kids were standing outside, and I asked them if they were ready to go, and the guy said, "I'm ready to go. Where are we going?" I said, "We're going to church. You want to go?" He said, "Oh, hell no."
Okay, I'm sorry I asked. Yeah. So, could have censored it, buddy. So, he's your son, you know. All right. The guy actually is the one who kind of made the funny and said, "Where are we going? What about us? What if we actively suggested to somebody, hey, I'm a member at Parkway and I want you to come visit with us." Some of you do that, and of course you're not going to hold up your hand and say, "I do that." You know, I'm not going to show off on yourself. But this is something really simple that we can do, and you're going to get rejected. Probably 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100. But that one time, you might get somebody to come. Something else to think about is as it becomes a habit with you, it's going to become easier and easier to invite somebody. What are some ways that we can invite folks? I guess this question really is, do we do it? And why not? Why don't we do it? Or why do we? Has it become easy for you? Yes, sir.
There, out in the foyer, there are cards that show the times and the address of the thing.
Right.
On the back, it's got a place for your name and phone number and email. And so I carry those in my wallet. And then when I find somebody, or at a restaurant, a server, or somebody else at a restaurant, I should do it more. I don't always do it.
Yeah.
It's hard to approach the guy who's going to serve you.
So do you just slip it to them, or do you actually speak to them?
Part of the conversation.
And what do you say? What do you tell someone? So you're at a meal this afternoon, and you're taking Dad out, right? And you say, I got this card here, and I want to tell you about the congregation I'm a member of, and it's down here or wherever. Here are the directions. Love for you to come. Can you do that? I mean, are they going to get mad at you? No, they want a good tip from you, so they're going to be nice to you. When you go to your hairdresser and say, I have never invited you to church, but I want to do that. Why are we uncomfortable about that? What if Paul the Apostle went to Starbucks and we were served by the barista? It's just me and Paul. We're just sitting there. We're talking about Romans. And he says, hold on just a moment, Mark. And he goes to the barista and he talks their ear off and says, are you a Christian? And starts teaching them. Can you see Paul doing that? And what am I doing? I'm going, come on, man. You're embarrassing me. Well, I don't necessarily want to get in people's face and stuff it down their throat. I don't want to be treated like that. But maybe we could be more vocal about it. Why don't we do that as much as we might wish we did? I've got two hands here. I'm going to get Clark, and then I'm going to get James. Somebody fixed a flat on a car. Okay. Is there anyone here who is a member of the Lord's church because somebody invited them? Got a hand here from one of our guests today. Do you know someone? Okay. Of course, in your case, you're kind of interested in the person who invited you. Okay. But it changed your life in more ways than one. How many of you know someone who was invited and became a Christian ultimately?
I do.
Okay. Who?
A friend of mine.
Okay.
She's a Christian. She goes to church in Alice.
Wonderful, wonderful. When I was growing up, it was all the rage to have advertisements, and we go cold into neighborhoods. I was just a little kid, and I know my father did that, and he has some stories he could tell you about some interesting people along Nebraska Avenue in Tampa, going on a Saturday. And wow. I don't find, is that a way to do it? Yeah, to go just say, hey, I'm knocking on your door. What's the reputation people have when you come knocking on doors to advance the gospel? Yeah, you're some cult or something like that. Which do you think is going to have more of an impact? I'm just asking your opinion. Which will have more of an impact? You cold calling someone, knocking on their door on a Saturday morning, or you having some sort of connection with someone? They cut your hair, they mow your yard, they serve you lunch. Which do you think will have more of an impact? Yeah, when you know someone. We have people who come and visit us from the community, and they just saw our sign, and they thought, well, I'll come in. Generally, those aren't the ones who stick around. So something for us to think about as we are wanting to advance the gospel. We want to take what Paul has said and apply it. All right, we're gonna go on now to verse 15, and then we'll talk about some ways we'll talk amongst ourselves about ways we can advance the gospel here in just a moment. Verse 15, he says, some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. All right, I've highlighted the words love and defense for a reason, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But you see in these verses that some are preaching out of envy, and that's where they're highlighted green. Some preach from envy and rivalry, others from goodwill. Actually, I guess I got it the opposite. Green with envy are the good people, so never mind. Green means good. Some, the latter, do it out of love, knowing that, oh, I remember now. Notice how it alternates. Some who are bad, others who are good, others who are good, and then the bad. So bad, good, good, bad. Yes, sir.
I've never really felt like I understood what preaching the gospel from envy and rivalry was. Can you enlarge upon that?
Can somebody enlarge on how preachers might preach out of envy? I mean, let me ask you this. In the business world, are there people under their bosses who work against their boss, connive against them, hate their boss because they beat them out of the competition, and so they work under them out of rivalry and envy?
Well,
And they're trying to outperform their competition. Christian,
this translation says selfish ambition.
selfish
I think we
ambition.
understand that.
Okay.
I'll see that a lot.
So in the workplace, we do see, we're aware that there's a lot of rivalry, and it's not friendly competition. It's competition, but it's unfriendly. What's good, though, is that Christians do not do that. Preachers would never try to outdo each other or get envious because somebody's got 17 gospel meetings and someone else just has 2. Ma'am? What'd you say? Some would. I could talk about that. We're human. We all are. What absolutely amazes me is that there are people who have a measure of success by the world standards. They're popular, they're in demand. And that becomes their obsession. It becomes a distraction to their local work. Yes, sir.
Is it possible that what we read about in the First Corinthian letter, about there were some who said, I'm of Paul and I'm of Apollos, even though it wasn't the intention of Apollos to develop some kind
A following.
but over time that may motivate somebody to try to build their
Yeah.
following more so than Paul.
Preachers are different. They all have different personalities. They all have different ways of presenting things. And you may gravitate to someone naturally, and they might have liked the eloquence of Apollos over Paul. Yes, ma'am.
This is a little off the subject, but it isn't.
Okay.
Is when I run across people that I've invited to church,
Mm-hmm.
they're on their second, third marriage. And that seems to permeate everything
It does.
these days. And I mean, how do you don't want to decide for them what they will and won't do, but it is problematic.
I would invite somebody, even if you know they're on a third or fourth marriage, and let them hear the gospel and let them decide for themselves. Do we teach on it? Absolutely. I'm going to preach on it, but it is extremely heart-wrenching when you suspect that somebody is in an unscriptural marriage, and you have to preach on it. You have to talk about it.
Mark,
Yes.
it is similar to the rich young ruler who knew what he had to do to be right, and he turned away. He had much riches, so he went away
Sorrowful. So people know they're not in a right relationship with God, and they'd have to make some big sacrifices. We need to invite them too. You just never know. Yes, sir.
I was in Greeley, Colorado, and we were trying to begin a church there, and I had gotten this man to come.
Okay.
And of all things in the class,
we talked about marriage and divorce. Boy, after the service, he came up to me and he blew up in my face. He was on, I think third or fourth marriage, and but you have to preach the truth, but at the same time, you're going to make enemies,
Right, absolutely, unfortunately. All right, so my color coding did not pan out the way I wanted it, but you've got some who are preaching out of envy. Others are doing it from goodwill. They're doing it for the right reason, and they're encouraged by Paul. They're emboldened by Paul. Others look at that and go, I don't like that Paul, and he deserves to be in prison for whatever reason, or this is my chance to shine and advance my career as a preacher. I don't know what all of Paul is getting at. But what is Paul's attitude about it? What is his conclusion? That's verse 18. In verse 18, what does he say? As long as Christ is being preached. That's what matters. Paul is not worried about what others think. Okay, so here in these verses, what we're seeing is some key words that I've emphasized just looking at them, and here's why. Because these four words, gospel, imprisonment, defense, and love, are all mentioned in the introduction. Going back to what we looked at last week, we suggested, one scholar has said that the introductions to Paul's letters, we like to kind of get through them and say, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, or a slave of Jesus Christ. I give thanks to God always for my remembrance of you, kind of boilerplate. But that Thanksgiving, that prayer is going to have basically a table of contents that is going to play out throughout the rest of the letter. It's something we don't study enough. You also will see connections between the introduction and the close of the letter, and we'll get into that later. But just think about this. The word gospel is used twice in the introduction, in verse 5 and verse 7, part of the Thanksgiving. It's used twice in the opening of the letter, of the body of the letter. He mentions his imprisonment once in verse 7, part of the Thanksgiving. He says, I give thanks for you because you are partakers of me of grace, both in my imprisonment and in the defense of the gospel. Look how many times he talks about his imprisonment in the beginning of the body. And of course, love. What did Paul pray for? I pray that your love may abound more and more. And in verse 16, what did he just say about love? The latter do it out of love. Paul, I know John is called the apostle of love because he mentions it so much, especially in the Gospel of John and in 1 John. But I'd say a close second would be Paul. He talks about love all the time. And so here he is talking about how you are my partners in the gospel. And together we are progressing. We are advancing the gospel. And he also talks about defending the gospel. And he talks about that in the first part, his introduction in verse 7. Both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you're my partners. And then in the body of the letter, he mentions that again, the defense of the gospel, verse 16. Some do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. We're not just I'm not trying to tell you everything you need to know about Philippians. One, I don't know everything about Philippians. But two, I want you to get in the habit of seeing the words that are here and looking at the introduction and seeing how it plays out throughout the rest of the letter, just trying to give us a good way of looking at Paul's letters. They are not thrown together. They are written carefully, and that's what we're trying to do this morning. Yes, sir.
Well, when Paul says that he's happy about Christ being preached,
He's happy about Christ being preached.
It's easy for some to read in
that as long as Jesus is mentioned in a particular setting, everything's fine.
Okay.
And Paul is not in any way saying that. These people are actually presenting.
They're preaching the gospel. Maybe.
Without error,
Right.
maybe for questionable.
Right. So their motives are wrong, but they're preaching the right gospel. Paul's okay with that. Then there are people who might do the opposite. Their motives are right, but they're preaching the wrong gospel, and Paul's not upset, not happy with that. Is Paul happy that people are preaching the gospel out of envy? Well, no. But his attitude is supreme. He is saying, they're not hurting me. I'm in prison. I can't preach the gospel. Some out of envy. Okay, but it's not hurting me. They're hurting themselves. And that is truly remarkable to me. So here's the first paragraph in this section, verses 12 through 14. He talks about the advance of the gospel even though he is in prison. Even though he is in prison. Verses 15 through 17, he talks about the motives that people have for preaching the gospel. Some good, some bad. But verse 18, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense, that's bad, or in truth, that's good, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. Last week we suggested that the key concept in the book of Philippians is unity. Not going to rehash that. But a close second is joy and rejoicing, because it appears again and again throughout this letter. And here is yet another one of those, another link with the opening section where Paul talked about joy as well. I rejoice. Paul's in prison. Why is he rejoicing if he is in prison? Because the gospel is being preached. That's all that matters. Wait a minute, Paul's name is taking a hit here. Do you think some people are going to learn, well, Paul's in prison, and so he must have done something wrong. Maybe he did bring a Gentile into the temple like he's accused in Acts 22. Maybe he did do that. Does Paul care about his reputation? Whose reputation is he concerned about? The Lord. That's all he cares about. And this is how he begins the letter. Because what he's going to go on to talk about with the Philippians is their partnership with him in advancing the gospel. And he's going to say, you guys need to be united together as you do this. You need to have the humility of Christ as you do this. And he cites Jesus as the ultimate example. He's also going to talk about Timothy and a man named Epaphroditus. And he's going to talk about working hard collectively, but also working hard individually. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So this letter is just getting started. We're just getting started. It's a small, short letter, but it packs a punch. All right, so we talked about how hard it might be to invite someone. Can we talk for a couple minutes about what can we do to actually spread the gospel? For example, I want Cody to think about and talk with his wife and his buddies there. What if he went back to Texas Roadhouse? Was that an employee? It wasn't an employee. Never mind then, forget it. Just because just because somebody rejects the gospel, does that mean you give up on them? What if you go back to that person who said, I'm not going to church? What if you followed up with them? All right. List some ways we can help the spread of the gospel right here in Corpus Christi. Give me some definite ways we can do that. Ding, 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 ding. Okay. You got something, Allie? All right. So we'll start with Allie here, who has invited folks, by the way, some of her coworkers, and they have come to church, haven't they? One even obeyed the gospel.
I don't know that anyone have obeyed the gospel. I don't know that anyone has. I don't have contact with some of them where they've gone their
Okay.
own way. But us,
What are some ways we can help to spread the gospel here?
one way is I would say offer to share people. You know, there's a lot of people who talk about their problems at work, and so that's something that I think is an easy way to do it. Just a little like 2-minute prayer. It doesn't take
Okay.
much of your work time.
So somebody at work starts telling you, oh, about all my life's problems, and then you say, let's pray. And that gets their attention, doesn't it? That definitely does. Excellent, excellent. What else? Yes, sir.
Someone that I was talking with suggested that maybe in a vacation Bible school kind of thing, a lot of women might bring their young kids just to have
Mhm.
daycare.
Yeah.
And they have in that setting been converted. They say, well, I think I'll stay and listen, and they do.
Yeah, VBS has really been an evangelistic tool as much as it is an opportunity to get our kids excited about church. So VBS has been talked about here, but it is very much an evangelistic tool. All right, who else? I saw you guys talking a lot.
We were talking about just keeping some things very simple.
Okay.
Don't try to overthink something.
All right. Well, we had a couple of suggestions. And one is we could get a lot of people here in the door if we built a fellowship hall. We could. And then Janine suggested that we put an ad out, maybe on our Facebook page, and we say, you come to Parkway on June 15th, or we'll make it next week, June 22nd, 2025, and there will be 3 $250 gift cards to Texas Roadhouse underneath a seat. Do you think we could get some folks in here? Who said no? I like Texas Roadhouse. I think I'd put it right over there, one of them. Is that a good idea? We could maybe get an 85-inch TV and say, one lucky raffle winner will walk out of here with that TV. Would that get some people in the door? But what kind of heart would they have? What are they interested in? The loaves and the fishes. I like that answer. That's not what we're after. But wait a minute, we want to grow exponentially. We want to grow fast. We want to grow truly, and we are. We are. People come and they go, but we've had a lot of people who come and are a part of the work here and truly love the Lord. That's what we want. So what are some other ways we can do that? So one of them is when somebody has a problem at work, you don't blow them off and say, okay, that's nice. You actually listen to, and I'm sure you don't do that anyway, but pray with them. That's excellent. What's another way that we can spread the gospel right here in our community? Taking those cards to people and
Well,
advertising in the church.
What they call the social gospel appeal can be done in an individual way.
Okay.
In other words, you can invite people to your home, have a meal with them, or and then have some kind of Bible study with them.
Okay. How about social media? What can we do with social media? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm visiting, and I just thought that I found you guys through your website.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd say that I think your website is very inviting.
Okay.
And it's very.
I'm glad to hear you say that. We have not paid attention to the website as much as we should.
It seems like it's very. It states very what you guys are all about.
Yeah.
Very clearly, you don't have to.
I appreciate that.
And so I just thought.
Yeah, but we do need to give our website more attention. Anybody who wants to volunteer, please see Rob. Yeah. Put it on somebody else. Yes?
Social media is a way to do it. There are several Facebook groups and that sort of thing that are supposedly religious and even first century church kind of people that follow.
Okay.
And you can either create one yourself or join one that is one that teaches the right
Okay.
gospel.
Dwayne, how many followers do you have? How many friends do you have on Facebook? Okay. You got a bunch, right? Oh, come on. Allie, how about you? How many do you have?
I don't know, but I don't use Facebook.
You're like me. You don't use that. Somebody help me out here. How many friends do you have, Sierra?
I have
1,000! Of course, a lot of them are already Christians, right? But I bet a lot of them aren't. Could you tell them about Parkway and how great it is? I've asked that in sermons recently. Why is that funny, Shane? Why is that funny?
I thought you guys said you can tell how great I am.
Modesty prevents me. Let's talk the church up. What is Paul talking about here? I'm in prison, but the gospel isn't. It's out there. We may feel like we're just limited by the number of people that we can reach, but we're not. We're trying to reach out in this community. Let's get in the habit. Let's start encouraging each other and work our way toward being a church that is actively inviting others to church. Next week, what we're going to look at is the rest of chapter 1, and Paul is going to have some of the most wonderful words in this letter that we don't talk about a whole lot. He's going to talk about how we are one spirit, we are walking lockstep, joined together in our progress in our efforts to drive the gospel in our community. So thanks for cooperating this morning, and I hope that you learned some things about Philippians 1, 12 through 18. Thank you.